So when you arrived at that residence on Hope Spring, were you under the impression that this was the type of call that you would initially be handling?
From the initial information provided, it was a stolen vehicle coupled with some type of verbal altercation between the caller and their adult daughter.
Okay. How many people were inside the house at that point? Do you have a recollection?
Initially, there were 3 adults inside the home.
Okay. Do you remember an individual by the name of Cindy Anthony?
Yes.
Was Cindy Anthony inside the home?
Yes, she was.
Do you remember an individual by the name of George Anthony?
Yes.
Was George Anthony inside the home?
Yes, he was also in the home.
How about an individual by the name of Casey Anthony? Was she inside the home?
Casey was also inside the home.
All right.
Where was Lee? Because Lee gets to the house first. So that's what I'm wondering, is because Lee gets to the house first, and we don't hear that Lee leaves. We haven't heard testimony that he leaves. Anyway, it's just interesting. So he says he sees 3 adults, and he names Cindy, George, and Casey, but no Lee.
All right. And do you have a recollection as to the demeanor of these individuals upon your arrival?
George didn't say too much initially. Cynthia was quite upset.
At that point, what actions do you take?
I began to just ask, why was she calling? What was the nature of the call in relation to the vehicle? She explained that situation. Later, we gathered more information on the whereabouts of her granddaughter, and her granddaughter was missing at that time.
Okay. How soon after your arrival do you speak with Casey Anthony, if you do at all?
I mean,
I spoke with her shortly after that. I can't.
Imagine being law enforcement, okay, and you show up and you're used to dealing with well, maybe you're not used to dealing with reasonable people, but you're hoping you're going to deal with reasonable people. And you show up, you're responding to this call about stolen car and stolen money or whatever. And you get there, and it turns out actually neither of those things are true. However, we do have a missing toddler on our hands. You'd be like, what is wrong with you people, right? I mean, it's just so surreal. It's one thing that it's like this toddler is missing and no one's reported it, but it's even weirder when you know that this entire interaction with law enforcement was premised upon lies from Cindy and making up these other issues. And it's just, to me, there's something really interesting about that, right? It's only after these other made up issues that then it comes out about Kaylee being missing. I don't know. It's interesting.
You saw the white Pontiac Sunfire?
I did see the Sunfire in the garage, yes.
And the trunk was open?
I believe so, yes, the trunk was open.
And you were in and out of the garage?
I wouldn't say I was in and out of the garage, no.
You've been in the garage that evening?
I know we went through the garage one time to talk to different parties, actually to walk outside with Casey.
You did not observe any odors of any decomposition coming from that car?
No, I can't say that I did.
When you arrived, the Mrs. Anthony, what was her demeanor like?
She was upset.
Okay. And Mr. George Anthony, what was his demeanor like?
It was calm, quiet.
And what about Casey Anthony's demeanor? What was she like?
She was fairly quiet.
That's exactly what the other
Just like Mr. Anthony.
Yes.
The individuals in the house with these armed deputies would include George Anthony, correct?
Correct.
Cindy Anthony.
Correct.
And Lee Anthony. Do you remember Lee Anthony being there?
Yes, I do.
Wait.
Do you remember Lee?
Okay, so now Lee, so I've been mentioning this, I was like, what the fuck happened to Lee Anthony? So Lee Anthony's there. The other deputies did not see him there. And I was like, where's Lee Anthony? Lee's supposed to be there.
Lee Anthony leaving and returning.
I don't remember him leaving.
Oh, interesting.
And returning.
Interesting. Where did he go? We have not heard anything about this. This is the first we've heard. It's the other reason it's interesting is he already testified and he was not asked anything about this.
Did you make any effort to stop Lee Anthony if he left? If he wanted?
Interesting. She's bringing this up for a different reason than, okay, she's not bringing this up to answer the question of what the fuck happened to Lee Anthony, which is probably what the jury is thinking, right? Because that's what I was thinking. Like when you have all these other deputies that are like, yeah, we saw 3 people, Casey, George, and Cindy. And it's like, well, where's Lee? she's not bringing it up, unfortunately, to answer that question like she should. She's bringing it up to try to point out he was free to come and go, so therefore Casey shouldn't have felt like she was in custody, which that doesn't even make sense anyway. But that's her goal here. It's not really to clarify information for the jury. It's to try to make it seem like, like Lee Anthony wasn't a suspect, which, I mean, again, what good does that even do? But where was he going?
July 16, 2008. The time right now is 04:11 hours. I'm Detective Melich with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, present here at 4937 Hope Spring Drive. I reference Orange County case number 08-069208. I am with Casey Anthony, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Casey, you understand this is being recorded?
Yes.
Do you have any objection to that?
No.
All right. Casey, I got called here by Sergeant Reggie Hosey with the Orange County Sheriff's Office in reference to a missing child. We sat here and talked for a short moment before we went on tape because I wanted to make sure that your sworn statement, which I'm looking at, was accurate. I'm looking at 4 pages of a sworn statement. On the bottom appears to be your signature. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying that everything contained in these statements are true and accurate?
Yes.
Also, before I turned on the recorder, I gave you a chance because I wanted to explain what happens if you make a false report or if there's something about this incident that you're not telling us the truth of.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make sure I made it perfectly clear that, if you want to go ahead and rescind this statement, and if you want to tell me a different story about what happened,
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to fabricate a story to kind of make something look a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
now is your time to tell me. Are you telling me that this is the story you want to stick with?
That's the truth.
Okay. How long had you known Zenaida?
Almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years Christmas this year.
And where did you meet her? Who did you meet her through?
A mutual friend. His name is Jeffrey Michael Hopkins. I met him at Nickelodeon at Universal, and I met her through him. She was his son's nanny at the time.
When was the last time you spoke with him?
About a week and a half ago.
And when did she start watching over your child?
It's been within the last year and a half, 2 years that she started watching Kaylee. I had another friend watch Kaylee that I've known since middle school. When she went back to school, I was looking for a new nanny. Jeff offered to have Zenaida watch both kids. She agreed, and they kind of went from there.
Okay. And right in April 2006, roughly, is when Zenaida started watching
Yes.
over? Go back to your statement. You dropped off Kaylee on June 9th, and walk me through. You dropped her off to go to work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Get off of work and go from there.
I got off of work, left Universal, driving back to pick up Kaylee like a normal day, and I show up to the apartment, knock on the door, nobody answers. So I call Zenaida's cell phone, and it's out of service. It says that the phone is no longer in service.
Have you talked to anyone about Kaylee, about your incident with Kaylee? Or the fact
Outside
that
of-
she's missing?
A couple people, a couple mutual friends.
Who did you talk to about it?
I talked to Jeffrey Hopkins.
Mm-hmm.
I also attempted to contact Zenaida's mother and never received a call back from her.
Do you know Zenaida's mother's name?
Wow, man. I think it's Gloria.
Do you know a telephone number for Zenaida's mom?
I do not know.
So after a full year of dealing with Zenaida and having her babysit, and you don't
Switching
remember
numbers back and forth. Zenaida's number has changed a couple different times. She switched services between having Sprint and having AT&T or Singular.
What about Jeffrey? You've known him for at least 4 years.
His number's changed a couple different times from when he moved from Orlando up to North Carolina and back down to Jacksonville. I know I do have a current number for him.
Who else did you talk to about this besides Jeffrey? You said you tried to call Zenaida's mom. You talked to Jeffrey. Who else did you talk about?
I talked to Juliette Lewis. She's one of my coworkers at Universal.
She works. You still work at Universal?
Yes,
What do you do at Universal?
an event coordinator. Recent numbers. Her number just changed because she just moved back up north. She, within the last 2 months, has finished moving up to New York. She's subleasing her apartment.
So Juliette doesn't work at the Universal anymore?
No, she does not. Tried to find out just information from people going out to different places like Fusion Ultra Lounge and a couple bars that I know Zenaida had gone to downtown before to see if just kind of random talk if anybody heard about my nanny or talked to her lately.
Did you tell anyone specifically that Zenaida took your child?
No. The only two people that I specifically told were Jeff and Juliette.
And you don't have a number for Juliette?
Not offhand, no. I do.
I asked you this before, and I'll ask you just for the record. What's the reason you didn't call the police before? Since right now we're here because your grandparents or your parents asked you about the child, and they were concerned, didn't get an answer as to where the child was. They called the sheriff's office.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you call prior to today?
I think part of me was naive enough to think that I could handle this myself, which obviously I couldn't. And I was scared that something would happen to her if I did notify the authorities or got the media involved or my parents, which I know would have done the same thing. Just the fear of the unknown.
I asked you this at the onset and asked you before we went on tape, and I'll ask you again just to make sure we're clear. Is there anything about this story that you're telling me that is untrue? Or is there anything that you want to change or divert from what you've already told me?
No, sir.
Did you cause any injury to your child, Kaylee?
No, sir.
Did you hurt Kaylee or leave her somewhere and you're worried that if we find that out that people are going to look at you the wrong way?
No, sir.
And you're telling me that Zenaida took your child without your permission and hasn't returned her?
The last person that I've seen with my daughter, yes.
And have you talked, and when you talked to Jeffrey afterwards, I'm assuming that Jeffrey's child is still with him?
His child is still with him.
Okay. You said Zenaida had family up in New England, up in New York or
Yes,
something?
she has family down south. Her mother and her sister. Her brother's in New York. She's originally from New York.
She born and raised in New York? She have family outside of the country? Or
I don't know. As far as I know, she pretty much grew up there, moved down here, went to the University of Florida.
is she Puerto Rican? Is she Dominican? Is she white?
She's mixed. She's black and Puerto Rican.
Could you raise your right hand for me?
Yes.
Do you swear and affirm everything you just told me is the truth?
Yes.
What information, Mr. Baez, of record evidence that would be introduced that shows this was an accident?
The fact that Mrs. Anthony had informed him within 24 hours of him being involved in the case that they had accidentally, or that she had noticed that the ladder was left up on the pool. There are also multiple statements from both George and Cindy Anthony where they have clearly advised this officer that, in their opinion, this could have been an accident that was covered up, and that accident would have centered around the pool of this case.
Okay.
This officer did absolutely nothing with this information, did not inspect the pool, did not do anything, or did not even question Miss Anthony when he had the opportunity to.
What evidence, Mr. Baez, would one glean from inspecting a pool?
Well, if you never look, you'll never know.
Yeah, but let's say you look. What would you see to determine whether someone drowned?
Typically, the answer to that question would be inspecting the body, right? Because they can tell if, they had ingested water into their lungs and whatnot, right? However, here, because Kaylee was found almost 6 months after she went missing, we haven't heard from the ME yet, but we know it's undetermined. I'll be looking forward to that information. If they can say for sure that she couldn't have drowned, that would be interesting. But what he's saying is, here, because they're talking about the pool. So what would you have determined by examining the pool? And it's a good question. But the thing is that a detective would be able to answer that better than an attorney, right? And that would be kind of the point in asking the detective the question. What could you have gleaned from examining the pool? But right now, the judge and Mr. Baez are going to try to answer that question.
If a body's not found in a pool, how do you determine if it was drowned in that particular pool?
There could be spatters of blood around the pool. There could be any number of, there could be actual hairs, other trace evidence that could have been found.
Yeah, I think hairs is better, more likely than blood if someone drowned, right? Unless you're suggesting they were like beaten over the head and then drowned or something. But if they just were drowned or, just drowned in an accident, by themselves, unattended, then yeah, hairs, that's potentially, helpful.
not necessarily indicating the cause of death, but certainly, as the state will want to later on argue, that there is post-mortem banding on certain hairs. There's any number of things.
I mean, another thing too that could have been done is measuring him, as I've said a million times, measuring of the pool, measuring of the ladder. It's so crazy that it's still a mystery, right? We still haven't seen pictures of that stuff and have no measurements.
One could glean from that type of information or by investigating. And here's the point. You don't look, you'll never know. And in this situation, they looked at a car and they were clever enough to come up with something new like air tests. Who knows? Who's to say that they couldn't find something just a bit more clever when it came to surrounding around the pool? But if you don't look, you don't investigate, you're never going to know. It's
one thing that I would imagine could be gleaned from the pool is examining the pump, because the pools that you have the pumps and the filters and stuff. I would imagine that there could have been trace evidence potentially, collected in the pump or the filter of the pool, right?
Did you see the car that evening?
Which car?
The Pontiac Sunfire.
I don't recall what I saw parked where.
Were you made aware of anything going on with that car?
At some point throughout that evening, and I can't recall when, I remember there was a comment made about an odor coming from a car, but I don't recall who made it or at what point throughout my time there that occurred.
So immediately upon getting this information, you went and inspected the car?
No.
Okay. You were told that there is a missing child?
Yes.
In your investigation at that point, or that entire evening, you didn't find it necessary to secure that car in any way?
No.
Overrule us to the last question.
You may answer, sir.
No.
Again, please remember all of my previous admonitions and have a good evening. I understand one of you has a new name, Johnny Depp. Okay, have a good evening. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Mr. Hopkins, how old are you?
26.
Do you know Casey Anthony?
I do.
When did you first meet her?
Probably middle school.
Did you stay in touch from middle school up until 2008?
Through passing.
How would you characterize your relationship with Miss Anthony?
More or less acquaintances.
Weren't very good friends?
Not very good friends.
Did you ever introduce Casey Anthony to a woman by the name of Zenaida Gonzalez?
I did not.
Did you ever use Zenaida Gonzalez as a nanny?
No, sir.
Do you have any children?
No, sir.
No kids. No.
Did you see Casey Anthony in the month of June of 2008?
No, sir.
July of 2008?
Yes, sir.
Where did you see her?
It was at the Waterford Lakes Ale House.
Do you recall what day that was?
It was the first Tuesday in that July 2008.
Does July 2nd ring a bell?
Yes, sir.
All right. Who did you go to the ale house with?
A few friends of mine, Gabriel Fletcher and Corey Arnold.
Okay. And while you were there, you saw Casey Anthony?
Yes, sir.
Did you go there with her?
No, sir.
Were you planning on seeing her there?
No, sir.
Did you speak with her?
Yes, sir.
What was the nature of the conversation?
Hi, how you doing? Haven't seen you in a while. Exchange numbers, and that was pretty much it.
Did you ever hear from her again after July 2nd of 2008?
I did, through text messages. They seem to be mass text messages, I believe more than just myself got them, about going to a club called Fusion.
Did she ever tell you that Zenaida Gonzalez had taken her daughter?
No, sir.
Now, you said that you met with Detective Melich on July 16th of 2008
Correct.
at City Walk or somewhere else?
It was in my office, which is located in the parks.
Okay. At some point that day, did you have an opportunity to meet Casey Anthony?
I did.
How did that occur?
After we were unable to verify that she was currently employed, Detective Melich called her and placed her on speakerphone, asked her a series of questions. I couldn't confirm anything that she was saying to me. So he brought her, he had asked if it would be okay if a couple detectives could pick her up and bring her to Universal. I agreed. I assume she agreed as well.
Did you hear? You
I
said
did,
she was
actually.
on
I'm sorry.
speakerphone.
Yeah, I did. I did hear that she agreed that two detectives could pick her up at her house and bring her to Universal. He asked her what department she worked in. She stated she worked in events. The officer asked her if it was for marketing or entertainment. She stated it was a little bit of both, which couldn't be true.
Okay. So you go from the security gate to where?
We began to walk, fearing that we were going to go on a long expedition. I asked pretty directly where we were headed. She pointed to a building that I knew had nothing to do with the any events department and stated we would go in there. Okay. At that point, when we walked inside, Detective Melich began to look around and asked if we were in the events building. At that point, Ms. Anthony looked at me, put her hands in her back pocket and stated, "I don't work here."
You, the detectives, everybody there knew that she didn't work there, but went along with the charade to let her pretend, didn't you?
I wouldn't say we let her pretend because I knew she didn't work there, so I wasn't acting.
But that's the same theme of the family, right? Just like what we heard with Lee Anthony when he was talking to Casey and he knew she wasn't in Jacksonville, and then he pretends like she is, or he doesn't confront her with the fact that she's lying. Potentially what Cindy did with the imaginary friends, how plausible is it that she believed that? I don't know. And this is another example of that, isn't it? It's instead of telling her, it is interesting, right? Because they all know she's lying, but for whatever reason, they don't just confront her with that. They just let her, said, like this ruse. Like, it is interesting. I don't know what they were hoping to gain from that, since they already knew it was fake. It's pretty unique. It's a unique.
At some point during that conversation, do you make an inquiry of her as to whether or not she could come out to Universal Studios?
I believe I did, the best of my recollection.
How did that transpire?
Simply asked if I needed her to come out, I guess. I don't remember the exact conversation, so I can't tell you what I said verbatim on the phone. I recall asking her questions about the phone number and her boss, but I don't recall a specific conversation about her coming out to Universal. Okay. Obviously she did, but...
Well, how did that happen?
Well, I recall talking to my sergeant, John Allen, at one point after I talked to Casey. And I recall asking my sergeant at the time if there was a way that he can go over to Miss Anthony's home and pick her up to bring her to Universal Studios if she'd be willing to come. And I recall that Sergeant Allen actually took another detective, Appy Wells, and picked up Miss Anthony about 12:30 or so and brought her to Universal Studios.
All right. Did you tell Miss Anthony that you would like her to come to Universal?
I believe I did, yes.
Okay. Did she agree to come?
To the best of my recollection, she did. She didn't. I don't recall her saying anything about, no, I don't want to go, I refuse to go, nothing like that.
All right. So you made some arrangements for her to come to Universal?
That's correct. Right about this area is where she stops, turns around, and tells us she doesn't work there.
So what do you do next once she says that?
We ask Mr. Turtora if there's a room we can use to talk to her, because now obviously we would want to know why she would bring us to a place she didn't work.
Did you ask her?
You could see the same question could be asked of them, though, right? Because they brought her to a place they know she didn't work, right?
At that point, if she would speak with you?
I can't recall our conversation going into the room, but yeah, I believe I would have said something along the lines of, okay, we need to talk about this, but I don't remember verbatim what I said.
Did you advise her, or was it obvious because of the placement that the conversation that you were going to have was to be recorded?
I recall it wasn't surreptitiously recorded. I remember taking the recorder out and actually placing it, if I'm not mistaken, between her and I on the couch that we were sitting on. They were now in July 16th, 2008. It's about 13:20 hours. We're at Universal Studios. I'm here with Surgeon Allen. I'm here with Detective Happy Wells. Also here with Casey Anthony. And Casey, we talked earlier this morning, and we're working a case looking for your daughter Kaylee. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. We came here to Universal Studios. We're sitting in a little conference room. You know, obviously the door isn't locked. We just closed it so we got a little bit of privacy and talk to you. And a couple more questions came up I need to ask you about. Remember how I opened this whole thing in the morning?
Yeah.
By saying that, we need to get the complete truth and the snowball effect and how it goes? Okay. We're about halfway down that hill, 3/4 down that hill, and it's a pretty big snowball, which means that there's a lot of stuff going on right now. And I can tell you, just for a certainty, that everything you've told me so far has been a lie. So where we are right now is in a position that doesn't look very good for you. And this is going to be your escape hatch, so to speak. Okay, this is going to be the point where you stop all the lies and you stop all the fibs and you tell us exactly what's going on. I'm just being straight with you.
In the amount of time that I've done this, almost 30 years now, okay, I've learned this. People make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. The three of us have all made some mistake.
I swear, I feel so, again, for anyone who's watching Interrogations, I feel like they're not sure what approach to take with her, and they're just kind of like going back and forth. But you're going to see them go through all the different cliche ones, right? So they already used the monster word. Are you a monster? Are you called him Callous? And now we're going down the everybody makes mistakes route. I wonder if, there's some people where it's like, there's nothing you could do. They're not going to tell you what happened. Like Alex Murdoch is an example of that. I think Ezra McCandless probably also an example of that. I wonder if Casey's also in that category of literally there's nothing that anybody could have done in that room with her, that's legal in terms of interrogation tactics or whatever, interview techniques that would have gotten her to say what happened, assuming she knows.
Never had anybody do anything wrong to you. Everybody hurt you in any way, okay? Let me ask you a question. When somebody's hurt you in the past and they've come to you and said, I'm sorry, okay?
Something I will say, again, I'm trying to put my behavior panel hat on, that if you guys are noticing here, who's doing all the talking? Because it's not her, it's them. That even when they're asking her a question, for example, when he says, has anybody ever hurt you? She says, of course. He could have given her time to discuss that more. And it could have led to something else. But instead, he just keeps talking. If they're doing all the talking, that's not a good sign, right? Because you want the person who's the suspect to be talking. And especially when they're answering your questions, right?
I mean, you're a smart person. Figure it out, okay? So far, the only thing that we can say for sure at this point, okay, is that you have lied to him about all these things. You brought us here, okay? All right? Now, I want you to look at this from an outsider's perspective. Somebody somewhere down the road would have to decide, how this all plays out. What would you do? How would you see that person? How would you see that person differently? You might see somebody, maybe a young mother who made a mistake and, maybe initially was afraid to tell the truth, but at some point came forward and said, a horrible thing happened.
If you had told us the truth, we wouldn't be here at Universal Studios at a place that you've been fired since 2006. Well, you trying to explain to us, you have an office and all that stuff. We wouldn't be here. So we know, and this is the part we need to get past. I think
part of the trouble for Casey, too, I'm just thinking about it, is that she's already, or remember, she had already had these lies going. And that's the thing, right? She'd already been lying to her family about working at Universal still. She'd already been lying about, well, I don't know if you want to call it lying. We don't know yet. It's the imaginary friends, right? For years. If anything, it's at that point, in order to be consistent with the story you've been telling your family for years, you have to keep going along those lines.
If this is something an accident that happened, and no matter how you think people are going to look at you, they're going to look at you a lot worse if you continue showing that you're callous or not caring, and that you just show complete dispassion and disregard for human life. All of a sudden, something bad happens to my child, and people are going to think, I'm just a devil. Everything that you've told me this morning, from Zanny, from the addresses, from Universal, from all these people that you've talked to, including people that you...
And the thing is, again, to them, they think she's making this up to lie. And the thing that's so crazy is what they don't know yet is that these lies have been going on for years. That's the thing that's so crucial. I feel like maybe that's the part that they're missing here. Had they known that all of these lies were years old and they weren't just made up on the spot to try to explain this stuff, I wonder if their approach would have been different, because I would imagine it should be.
Okay, so you left her in Zanny's care on June the 9th.
The date mix-up is interesting, right? Because Casey thinks it's June 9th, and, you know, they talked about that a little bit with Cindy, but it's interesting because they learn once they get the video from the nursing home or whatever that she was still alive on June 15th. So, but the thing that I'm saying is interesting to me is that I wonder why Casey gave the date June 9th. Because we know Kaylee was still alive and well when she was pressed by her family, right, before that third 911 call, and she was talking with Lee and her mom, and she said 31 days. What's interesting is 31 days would actually have been correct from June 16th to July 15th. But the date that she gives is June 9th. I don't know. I wonder if we'll ever get more answers as to that.
And we're here because you brought us here, correct?
Absolutely.
You directed us here because we're going to your office to find out.
We're going to use that, but it's not really what happened. She's there because they brought her there.
So either way right now is not a very pretty picture to be painting. Either way right now with everything that you're telling us, you're painting yourself as a very bad person. Your family's going to suffer for this. Your friends are going to suffer for this. And remember what I told you about all these people coming out there to crucify you for this because of all the lies that you've been telling us. We need to stop that right now. No more lies. What happened to Kaylee?
I don't know.
You do know. What happened to Kaylee?
I don't know where she is. That is the God's honest.
Where was she the last time that you put her somewhere? Where was she?
The last time I saw her was on those steps at that apartment that I took you to this morning. The same apartment that I took the other officers to last night.
But you didn't give her to anyone. You didn't give her to anyone while you were there. See, listen to me. We're even pulling surveillance video from an apartment complex, and they have to keep this by law for several days. Okay, and we're not seeing you over there. Remember we had those two people that we were talking about, the person who had an accident or made an accident or made a bad decision, and a person who's just a cold-blooded, callous monster. That's telling me that you are the second person, this cold-blooded, callous monster who doesn't care and doesn't want to help because she's afraid that something so heinous happened that everyone's going to look at her and say, she's a monster, she deserves to go away, she deserves to never see the light of day, this bad thing should happen to her. I don't want to believe that right now, but you're giving me no choice. You understand you're giving me no choice. This is going to be the opportunity that you have right now. No matter how heinous you think that what happened was to Kaylee, this is your opportunity to tell us. This is going to be your only opportunity to tell us.
Is your daughter in a better place?
No, she's not.
Are you worried about her?
I'm absolutely petrified. If she was with her family right now, she'd be in the best place. She's not. If I wanted to really just get rid of her, I would have left her with my parents and I would have left. I would have moved out. I would have given my mom custody.
What's the next biggest concern? I know your major concern now is finding your baby.
Honestly, that's all I care about at this point. And I'll take that necessary step with whatever
Who would that be? I mean, who's going to be the next hurdle in your life as far as trying to explain that, no, I'm not a neglectful mother, I'm not, is it going to be your mom?
No, it's going to be saying that and proving that to myself every day. My mom flat out told me yesterday she will never be able to forgive me, and I even told her I'm never going to be able to forgive myself. Every day I've been beating myself up about this. Every single day.
Just go ahead because this is still running. I noticed it. Raise your right hand for me, just like this morning. You swear everything you told me is the truth now, about the lies and everything else? Okay.
You were talking during the interview about a surveillance video from the Sawgrass Apartments. Is there or was there a surveillance video that was available from Sawgrass Apartments?
No, there was no video.
Your next step was to...
The next place I went was to the Sawgrass Apartments.
Then you got all this information, which means that apartment's been empty for months.
According to Sawgrass, it had been.
No Zenaida Gonzalez.
Correct.
And then...
Incorrect. There was a guest card filled out with a Zenaida Gonzalez on it that we would later follow up on.
But no Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
No, the guest card didn't say Fernandez.
Right.
Interesting.
And after all of this goes on,
wonder if that's
you talk to Sergeant Allen again.
Wow.
Yes, in an effort to see if he can get someone to bring Miss Anthony to Universal.
Now, as your phone is ringing like crazy, and as you're getting all kinds of calls from Cindy Anthony, at one point you leave the room to call her back, do you not?
At one point, if my memory is correct, I actually leave the room with Sergeant Allen to discuss something with him out there. In the course of the interview, the phone was going off. You could hear it on tape. my memory serves correct, one of the phone calls was from Cindy Anthony, so, and I would have returned that call or spoken to her because I did during that break.
And what I'm getting at is, so when you got out of the room, you actually spoke with Cindy Anthony.
Yes.
Okay. And it was at this time that you first heard the incident with the pool ladder.
Yes, I believe it was at that time where I first heard about the ladder being found down in the pool and the gate being found open sometime in June.
Okay. And now that you're armed with this information,
Ladder gate.
you have the opportunity to go back in and question Casey about this pool ladder incident. Do you not?
Sure, I had the opportunity to.
And you found that information to be important, did you not?
Not necessarily.
Do you remember giving a deposition in this case, sir?
Yes.
And do you recall me asking you the question? Okay, and did you find that to be important information? And do you recall giving the answer yes?
I won't doubt that, yes.
Okay. So on September 10th, 2010, of course, you found that information to be important.
Any information that we were getting was considered important. It's a level of importance. If you're suggesting that that was critical information at the time I got it from Cindy, I'm here saying it wasn't critical. It was just another piece of information. So was it information? Yes, it was.
It was important information.
Yes, any information at that time would be important.
Absolutely. And you had the opportunity to question Casey or confront her with this information, did you not?
I won't disagree. I had the opportunity to go back in and ask her about the pool.
But you did not.
No.
In fact, you'd never confronted Casey with this information about the pool.
That's correct.
Detective, you're hereby excused, subject to recall. Thank you, sir.